This is Matt Coyne, host of The Cheap Seats. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast here on Public House Media.
This is Dr. Mariah White, host of Your Life Matters, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Your Life Matters, where we talk about dreaming big and dreaming bold to reach your wildest dreams in both your health and your happiness. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Your Life Matters. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome and thank you for joining the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast. I am your host, Jenna. I am a military spouse of almost 10 years, a health and fitness enthusiast, a dental assistant, and a mom. Again, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. And as always, if you find that today's episode speaks to you or resonates with you, or you know someone who could benefit from hearing this episode, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to share it. Also, I love to hear feedback from all of you, so if you have any feedback that you would like to leave, feel free to email me at confessionsofamilspouse@gmail.com, find me on Facebook at Confessions of a Military Spouse, or on Instagram at Confessions of a Mil Spouse, or you can reach out to me via publichousemedia.org. Whether you are a new spouse or a veteran spouse, you probably have questions regarding this crazy life. And that's why I created this episode. During this episode, I want to give you my top tips and best pieces of advice that I have used to help me navigate and get through this crazy military spouse life. I am so glad that you guys are here with me today, and I cannot wait for you to hear these top tips and best pieces of advice that I have to offer. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, my number one top tip and absolute best piece of advice that I can offer you, and if you take nothing away from this episode other than this piece of advice, please at least take this piece of advice away and continue to use it throughout your military spouse life. And that piece of advice is to be supportive. I understand that this life is not an easy life by any means, but it's going to be that much harder if you're not supportive. The more that you support your spouse, I feel like the better your life will be. And trust me when I say they do not want to be working these late hours. Your spouse does not want to go away on deployment. Well, I mean, usually they don't. But that's the territory of their job. And if you spend your time being negative and harping on them about these hours that they're working or the fact that they're going on other workups or deployments or whatever, it's just going to put them in a bad mood. And it's going to make work more miserable for them. And then they're not going to want to be at home or at work as much. And it's going to cause even more friction between the two of you. So I am here to tell you, just be as supportive as you possibly can. And I understand it's really hard to be supportive all of the time when all of this crazy shit keeps happening. But I want you to keep it in the front of your mind, and I want you to be conscious about it, and I want you to try to be as supportive as you possibly can, because I promise it will make your life so much easier. Okay, my next tip and piece of advice that I can offer goes along with being supportive, and that's also to be understanding. And I say this because I want you guys to understand that things change a lot in this life. And as frequently as they change just as quickly. And if you're not understanding about this, you will have an extremely hard time being a military spouse. You guys, I am the world's biggest planner. Not even joking. I like to plan days, weeks, months if I can in advance. But what I had to realize when I became a military spouse is that even though my spouse may have committed to something 2 weeks ago, if he isn't able to make what he committed to, that I need to be okay of that and I need to be understanding of that, because I need to realize that he's not doing it to make me mad. Well, I mean, I don't think he is. Sometimes he probably does, because that's just the nature of my husband. But usually he's not doing it to spite me. He's not doing it to purposely hurt me. And more than likely, it's out of his control. But if I spend my time getting angry and upset at him, it's only going to make him angry and upset at me. And it's just going to make for an overall really bad situation. The other thing that I want you guys to try and understand is that a lot of things are going to be out of your spouse's control. And instead of getting mad or being upset about it, like I said, we need to be understanding and sympathetic, because as I just said, it's only going to make matters worse if we get mad and upset. So my third piece of advice that I have for you guys goes hand in hand with the first two tips and pieces of advice that I've given you. And that's to be flexible. And as I literally just said, I am a planner and flexibility is not my thing. If I have a plan in place, I want to stick to it, and I think that it really shouldn't change. However, let's be honest, that's not realistic. And when we were on recruiting duty taught me a whole lot of flexibility. I'm not saying that it didn't take me a while to learn that flexibility and that I don't struggle with it still, because OMG, do I ever. But after the fourth and fifth and even sixth time of being let down and disappointed because there was yet another thing that was supposed to happen but couldn't happen because of recruiting duty or the military in itself, I finally have learned to be flexible. I just said, though, I'm still working on it. I'm not super great at it. It's not my strongest suit. But it was one thing that I learned if I needed to survive in this military life, that I needed to be flexible. I also learned to do my own things, and I learned not to wait around. So I learned that if I was going to plan anything important, I couldn't necessarily set it in stone, and that it needed to be flexible. So if I was going to make important plans, I generally tried to have a date range and then narrow it down as it got closer to the time, so I had more of a solid idea that my spouse was going to be able to be there. I also learned what exactly I needed to wait around to do and what I didn't. And let me just tell you guys, I learned that I can do a lot of things and make a lot of decisions without my spouse. So I'm just telling you guys, the more flexible you are, the better off, I promise, that you will be. The fourth piece of advice that I have for you guys would be to always have power of attorney. Even if your spouse is only going away for a few weeks, I would still so highly recommend that you get a power of attorney. And I would also go as far as to recommend getting a general power of attorney, but also a special power of attorney, because let me just tell you, without fail, during even just those few weeks that they're gone, something will break or need fixed or whatever the situation is, and you will need power of attorney. And let me just tell you how much of a pain in the ass it is if you don't have it. These people do not mess around when it comes to their power of attorney. And if you don't have power of attorney, chances are, especially in a big place like San Diego, let's say, they're not going to let you do what you need to do just because your name is attached to theirs and you guys might be married. If you don't have that piece of paper and that power of attorney, they are not going to let you do what you need to do. Plus, I have also learned in life in general, it's better to have something and not need it than not to have something and need it. So my next piece of advice is a little bit different, but something that I definitely think needs to be talked about and something that I think everybody needs to hear. And it's that not all spouses are the same. And you might be sitting there wondering what the heck I'm talking about, or what do I mean by that? Well, if you're a military spouse, chances are you have either heard or sadly experienced horror stories of other military spouses, because unfortunately, not all military spouses can be super duper amazing like me. Totally kidding, guys. But in all seriousness, there are many different types of military spouses. There are the super laid back, don't really get involved in the drama spouses. Then you have the very active and all the volunteer work spouses. You have the genuine spouses who truly want to be your friend and help you. And then there are even the spouses that wear their husband's rank and everything in between. First of all, I just want to say, please, please, please do not ever be the spouse that wears their spouse's rank. No one will like you, and everyone will talk about you. This is not an opinion of mine that I have. I am simply stating a fact, a very well-known fact, that if you are a spouse that thinks you wear your husband's rank, people are not going to like you, and they are not going to talk to you. They may talk about you, probably not in a way that you would want, but it's just the way it is. And you have to understand that just like all human beings are not the same, military spouses are no different. So keep that in mind and take everything with a grain of salt and find the spouses that work for you. Next up on my list of pieces of advice, this one is a good one, especially if you have heard my last podcast episode before this. Comparison is a thief of joy. And like I said, if you listened to my previous podcast episode, you'll understand why this is one of my top tips and pieces of advice. And yes, this is absolutely where that episode was derived from. Like I said in my last top piece of advice, is that every spouse is different, but every military experience is different as well. And if you compare your military experience to another spouse's experience continually, you are going to live a very, very miserable military spouse life. So please go listen to my last episode about comparison being a thief of joy, and please do not compare your life to anyone else's. My next tip or piece of advice is actually a pretty fun one, and I think most quote-unquote seasoned spouses has already figured this out, but it's always good to remind them and totally good to let the newbies in on this little secret, which is, if at all costs, do not shop at the commissary on payday. For those of you that are listening that maybe aren't military spouses, if you don't know, the commissary is a grocery store on base. And the reason that I say this is because I actually try to avoid the commissary a few days after payday as well. And I try to avoid it like the plague on and around payday. And there were a few times recently that I forgot. And let me just tell you, it's insane, which is why I'm telling you to avoid it at all costs. I swore that I would never do it again. And since then, I haven't, because I started using Walmart grocery pickup. And if you haven't checked that out, you really should. And you can thank me later for that. And since we're on a roll with fun pieces of advice, this one is fun as well. When it comes to PCSing or moving, always let the military do it for you. Yes, you can do it yourself, and yes, you can bank a considerable amount of money, and yes, we have actually done it both ways. Prior to having a child, it was a lot easier to do it ourselves, and my husband much preferred doing it ourselves because he's in logistics, so that is literally his job. I preferred it too, but for totally different reasons, because I'm very much a throw stuff in a box if it fits type of person. He obviously is not. So he would unpack my box and then repack the box. And finally, after he got tired of doing that time and time again, he realized that I was probably doing it on purpose and told me I wasn't allowed to pack boxes anymore, which I was totally okay with. But in all seriousness, now that we have a child, it is so much easier to allow the military to pack and move us. We have been very fortunate with our movers, and we've never had any issues with broken or missing items. So maybe my feelings on this would change if that had happened, but for now I'm sticking with let the military move you. Although I do want to say, I just recently saw an article on Facebook, and if you're a military spouse, you may have saw it as well. And it was a picture of a swap meet where there were military packed boxes of people's home goods with prescriptions and papers and all kinds of stuff in the boxes that these people at swap meets were going through. I didn't do a lot of research about it. I don't really know the context behind it, so I can't really speak on it, but I know that a lot of military spouses have had pretty bad experiences with the military movers, and I can't imagine that this whole swap meet military box situation is going to make those feelings towards the military movers any better. So there are probably going to be a lot of spouses that disagree with me on this piece of advice, but this is, again, my own personal experience, and you can take it for what it is. My second to last piece of advice that I want to give you is to find someone you can talk to and ask questions. Find someone whose spouse is in the military, or find someone who is maybe a veteran themselves, even just finding someone who is knowledgeable about the area. So when you move or when your spouse is deployed, you can ask them about the area. What are some fun things you and the kids can do? Where are the cheapest gas prices in the area? Or even just someone to have a glass of wine and wine with them about how shitty deployment is and how you can't wait for it to be over. Everybody needs somebody. And if you are as lucky as I am, or should I say my best friend is, you will find someone who will basically let you live with them while your spouse is deployed because they know it sucks and they love you like family. So shout out to my friends who are currently letting me basically live at their houses. And finally, the last piece of advice that I want to leave you guys with is this. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the adventure. Every move is a chance to explore a new state or maybe even a new country. Every deployment is a chance to learn something about yourself you maybe didn't know. Every duty station is an opportunity to do something new. So I highly encourage you, when everything around you is changing so rapidly and you feel like you are so out of control of your own life and what's happening within it, because trust me, there will be those times. I want you to take a moment to pause and breathe and allow yourself to relax. Whatever's happening may not be exactly what you want to happen, but unfortunately, most of the time in this life, this choice is not usually ours. So instead of letting it get you down and bring you down and potentially causing you to miss out on the beauty of life, a new duty station and a new state, acknowledge those feelings and then take them and turn them around to explore the new state, explore the new country, explore the new duty station. Find things out about yourself that you may not have known. And you may just be surprised to find out that there are some things wherever you are in your life that you thought you might hate that you actually might like. I hope that you guys have a fantastic Tuesday. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you can take some of these top tips and pieces of advice and apply them to your own life. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform so you never miss an episode.